So today we are going to discuss about diagnosing deficient Sadachar standards. That is, it's very important that the devotees follow the standard that Srila Prabhupada has established. And the leaders have the responsibility to see that the standard is being maintained. Srila Prabhupada himself used to monitor that. While he was traveling, he would always ask the leaders whether the devotees are following proper standard, like are they getting up early in the morning, whether they're maintaining their sadhana in a proper way. And Prabhupada gave a very clear indication, clear instruction that the activities of all devotees from 4 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock in the morning should be very, very carefully monitored. Every devotee who is staying in the temple must attend Mangalarati, must attend deity greetings, Guru Puja, Bhagavatam class, and then of course Prasadam. And this is the very core of our practice. Devotee means he is attending the morning program, especially the temple devotees. Sometimes Prabhupada ran into some difficulties about that. Like some devotees who came to India those early days, they saw in some other temples, they are not following such a strict standard, and they are not having Mangalarati at 4:30. And sometimes they used to hear also, oh, why have Mangalarati at 4:30? That is not the right standard. And they would go back to America or into their respective countries, and they would tell other devotees. And the devotees also would start to consider whether we really need to follow this standard. Another thing, whether do we really need to take bath at 4 o'clock or before we Mangalarati, after we get up from our sleep. But Prabhupada was very particular. No, this is the standard. When one becomes sick, then it is another thing. But the devotees must follow the standard. Prabhupada used to say that only when one is sick, he may not attend the Mangalarati. But if he is so sick that he can't really get out of the bed, then he should not also take any prasad. So that is the thing. If you don't come to the Mangalarati, there is no need for you to take prasad. And that standard that Srila Prabhupada gave must be maintained very, very carefully, because that is the basis of our movement. That's the basis of our integrity. That's the basis of our unity and the indication of our sincerity. And there should not be any deviation from that. Like nowadays also, recently also I have seen, like some leader from leading sannyasi from some other math was questioning that why marriage, why sex life is only for procreation. Like they even question which scripture says that. It's not a matter of which scripture says that. Our scripture is what Srila Prabhupada gave. That should be our scripture. And of course, when you look at the scripture, we find that very clear indication. Putrarthe kriyate bharja. One must accept a wife for the sake of procreation. And even in the animal kingdom we see, even in other community, other species of life. Sex only for procreation. So if that is the standard in animal life, why shouldn't be the standard in human life? So these are the standards that Srila Prabhupada gave, and we must follow them very, very carefully. So it is the responsibility of the leaders to see that the core spiritual practices and regulations are strictly followed by the devotees, especially the devotees who are living in the temple. The congregation may not be able to follow that. Of course, those days during Prabhupada's time, we didn't really have much of a congregation. Like all the devotees were temple devotees, and Prabhupada was very particular that the devotees maintain that standard. Nowadays I am also seeing devotees, temple devotees are growing long hair, and some devotees, even some leading devotees also have seen, they're shaving their head but not keeping any sikha. Actually, to shave head and no sikha means Mayavadi. The indication of a devotee is sikha. And Prabhupada used to be very, very particular about that. I can't imagine during Prabhupada's time any devotee is coming in front of him with shaved head and no sikha. Prabhupada would be furious. I have seen how furious Prabhupada became when a sannyasi had a little growth of his hair. Not even a month, 1 month's growth hair. And Prabhupada was furious. Prabhupada said, this is the seed of your hippie mentality, the culture of long hair. Our culture is shaved head. And if you want to keep hair, don't tend it at all. Let it grow. That is, those who are living in a forest, away from everything, those who can't shave their head, that is another consideration. But in civilized world, clean shaved. And unfortunately that standard is becoming diluted, and the leaders should be very, very careful that the standard is maintained, and that's how we actually recognize a devotee. Shaved head, shikha, tilak, kantimala. If this standard is maintained, one can wear a three-piece suit. No problem. Sometimes I have seen, say for example, when in Vrindavan there was a scientific conference, and eminent scientists were invited to participate from different parts of India, and devotee scientists, Prabhupada asked them to wear Western clothes. And they were wearing suit and tie, but shaved head and tilak. And Prabhupada was very pleased to see them like that. He said, this is our standard, tilak. That is the indication we are devotees. But otherwise, external dress is not so important. You can wear anything according to the time, place and circumstances. Prabhupada even wanted the devotees, assume big positions, like someday the devotees will become judges, and they would go to the court wearing tilak. But of course they'll have the dress of a judge and so forth. And this is how Srila Prabhupada wanted us to follow the standard. He set the standard, and our business is to follow the standard. And this is how when the root is watered, the rest of the tree will flourish. When our devotees follow the strict standard of Vaishnava culture, then everything will become so wonderfully established. Srila Prabhupada came here to spiritualize this world. The spiritualization of this world will take place according to how effectively we establish the Vedic culture. And Prabhupada's instructions became very, very prominent through his letters. Here we can come across one letter by Srila Prabhupada to Balimardan Prabhu, written in August 1970. And in that, Prabhupada is saying, in this institution, if there is a bad disciple, he can burn the whole institution into ashes. The governing body commission's duty is therefore to see that every member is following the rules and regulations and chanting 16 rounds regularly on the beads. I hope the GBC, in cooperation with the sannyasis in the touring program, will be able to keep vigilance systematically in order to keep the society as pure as possible. So this is the responsibility Prabhupada is giving the leaders of this institution, GBCs and sannyasis. GBCs should see that the standard in their zones is properly established, And the sannyasis, while they are traveling, they should also watch that how it is being practiced. In another letter to Hansaduta, Srila Prabhupada mentioned that our spiritual way should strictly observe the following points, especially neatness and cleanliness of all personal bodies. I still see those who are initiated as Brahmins, they do not wash their hand after eating even. So this is another standard of cleanliness. Before one eats prasad, he washes his hands and feet, at least his hands, and after taking prasad, he washes his hands. This is a very common practice in India. Every civilized family members follow that standard. And then chanting, the devotees are chanting 16 rounds daily, and Prabhupada is then commenting, I don't think everyone is following this principle. Like Prabhupada could see that not that all devotees are chanting 16 rounds. Now this is a must. This is a must. And once a devotee told Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada, I am so busy, I get only about 4 hours to sleep and I can't finish my rounds because I have so much work to do. Because that time the construction of the temple was going on. And Prabhupada's instruction was, then sleep less but finish your rounds. Like, don't neglect your responsibility for constructing the temple. Supervise the activities, but at the same time, don't neglect your chanting 16 rounds. And then the next consideration Prabhupada said is a temple worship which should be performed rigidly between 4 and 10 a.m. So every devotee must attend the programs in the temple. Morning Mangala Aratik, chanting 16 rounds in the temple preferably, then attend deity greetings, Guru Puja and Bhagavatam class. So this is the standard. And then Prabhupada writes, I find that the devotees are still sleeping up to 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. So in the GBC agenda, I do not find any such programs for reforming our past bad habits. So kindly as president of a temple, you try to observe yourself all the regulative principles and see all the members are following. So next consideration is using system of reporting for vigilance. Srila Prabhupada wanted different temple leaders, especially the temple presidents, would report to the GBCs and GBCs would report to Srila Prabhupada. In a letter to Abhiram Prabhu, Srila Prabhupada wrote, the system of temple presidents sending twice monthly report to the GBC was advised by me to facilitate my receiving news of all centers through the GBCs. You are free to write me directly when the occasion arises, but do not neglect to send regular reports to your GBC. So this is one standard that Srila Prabhupada established, that the temple presidents must send a report to the GBCs twice every month, once every fortnight. And in another discussion, the discussion was taking place between Prabhupada and Jayatirtha. So Prabhupada said the general report should be submitted at least monthly. And Jayatirtha replied, we have kind of system outlined in here, how reports can be done. It's technical things, but Srila Prabhupada interrupted, but they have that everyone is chanting 16 round, everyone is following the principles, so much money received, so much money deposited in the bank, and general reporting. Yes, everyone is chanting, or he is not chanting in spite of warning like that. So this is how Srila Prabhupada wanted to maintain the standard, and there's a vigilant watching over that, all the devotees' activities, especially the temple devotees. And Prabhupada very clearly mentioned that this movement, our temples, are not meant for lazies and crazies. This movement is meant for serious people. Those who are serious about finishing their business in this material nature and go back to Godhead. So unless and until one becomes serious, then what's the point in joining the movement and wasting their time? Better they don't come to the movement. And as Prabhupada mentioned, that one bad devotee can ruin everything. Just like there's an expression that one poisonous tree can destroy the entire forest, entire garden. One bad member in the family can destroy the entire family. Like we see, Duryodhan, just one person destroyed the Kuru dynasty. Just because of, and that's why they are called Kulangar. Kul means dynasty, and Angar means fire. Just as fire can, a small fire can set everything, turn everything into ashes, a bad member in the family can destroy everything. And that's why we should be very careful that no bad example is set. Because if one bad example is allowed, then the whole standard will be spoiled. Nobody will follow. Therefore, the leaders have the responsibility that everyone is following the standard. Nowadays, of course, we have a large congregation and we can't really control them so much, and they also have their difficulties because they have to earn money, they have to work for so many hours every day. So that is understandable. But those who are joining the temple and staying in the temple, it's a must. They must follow the standard that Srila Prabhupada has given us. Prabhupada wanted that the devotees, leaders, should set the example through their personal behavior. Apone achari Prabhu jibere shikhai. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself taught everyone by practicing himself. And Sanatana Goswami admired Haridas Thakur. Achar Prachar Namir, the Achar and Prachar, the following the standard himself through his own example, by practicing it himself and preaching to others. So the preachers, the leaders have to be very exemplary, that through their personal behavior, through their personal conduct, they must teach others. Then only our movement will have its credibility and people will take it seriously. Ultimately, everything depends upon the leaders. Jad jad acharati sreshtas. Just the way the leading individuals, the leaders of the society act, accordingly the common people will follow. So that standard must be maintained and there shouldn't be any compromise. We must remember that this Krishna consciousness movement has been established by Srila Prabhupada in order to spiritualize the whole world. That is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission. Prithivite ache jato nagaradi gram. In every town and village all over the world, this Krishna consciousness movement will spread and people will be motivated by that. They will practice this process so sincerely that the whole world will become spiritualized. And it is not impossible. During Parikshit Maharaj's time, that was the standard, that was happening. There was no meat eating, there was no intoxication, there was no illicit sex, there was no gambling. When Parikshit Maharaj gave those 4 places to Kali, Kali saw that nobody in his kingdom is practicing those activities. So he felt that there is no place for me in this kingdom. And today we can see how the world has changed. Like everywhere there is a massive, blatant propaganda for intoxication, illicit sex, meat eating and gambling. The cities are built just to promote these sinful activities. So that means the Kali is winning. When these 4 activities become prominent, that is an indication that Kali is spreading his influence most effectively. Now, Mahaprabhu's movement is going to counteract that influence of Kali. Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan movement will establish the principles of Dharma. That principles of Dharma means truthfulness, cleanliness, mercy, and austerity. And breaking of those four principles is amounting to meat eating, intoxication, illicit sex, and gambling. So we must be very careful about that we set the right standard through our own example. Follow the four principles and commit yourself completely to serving the lotus feet of Krishna. Materialistic activities means for my own sense gratification. And spiritual activities means Krishna's pleasure. Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanang Bhakti Ruchyate. Bhakti, devotional service, means to engage the senses to give pleasure to Krishna's senses. And when that happens, our life becomes successful. And the leaders have a great responsibility to establish that standard all over the world.